Welcome back to Sports Wrap. Here are the rescheduled games because of the COVID outbreak across the NFL. The Raiders were boarding buses for their trip to Cleveland on Friday when they were told to stand down. They will play the Browns tomorrow at 2 p.m. That will precede the Vikings-Bears game, which is the regularly scheduled Monday Night Football tilt. Washington and Philadelphia are rescheduled for Tuesday, just like the Rams and the Seahawks. Both of those games kicking off at 4 p.m. So SoFi Stadium is quiet today, and instead, you will be hosting a rare Tuesday night game. That's coming up, of course, between the Rams and the Seahawks. Gerard Moncure is there right now live at SoFi Stadium to give us the very latest on the Rams and their battle with COVID. Gerard?
Well, Kyle, thank you. Rams continue to fight what's been an uphill battle against COVID-19, but things appear to be on the mend before the quickly approaching 4 o'clock game on Tuesday against the Seahawks. Earlier today, starting cornerback Jalen Ramsey cleared from the COVID-19 reserve list, so he is good to go against the Hawks on Tuesday. Now, how bad has it been for the Rams? Check out this list. As of this morning, the Rams had 25 players on the COVID-19 reserve list, which was leading the National Football League, followed by the Cleveland Browns with 22, and the Washington Football Team and the Chicago Bears with 12. Earlier this afternoon, in a Zoom interview, wide receiver Cooper Kupp was asked how he dealt with COVID-19 last season.
I think with the change in protocols and things like that, there's a little more, there's a little more hope, coming off that thing, being able to try to take care of yourself so you can get off it. I mean, some of that stuff's out of your control. But like last year, you go through that and just kind of like, hey, this is what it is. You are off until this date, and that's just how it's going to be. So these new protocols kind of give guys a little bit of hope that they can kind of get back in this thing and I think it'll be easier to keep your mind in it, keep dialed in, and where you're not told that you're having a week and a half that you just can't be a part of things. So hopefully that helps out a little bit. It's I think a little bit different experience from last year to this year.
Now that Rams COVID-19 list reached as high as 29 players. That's how bad it was. But if they were playing this game tonight at SoFi Stadium, they would only have 4 starters missing from both the offense and the defense. They would be outside linebacker Von Miller, tight end Tyler Higbee, offensive lineman Rob Havenstein, and of course starting safety Jordan Fuller. And those players still have almost 48 hours to have 2 negative tests within a 24-hour period and come off the COVID-19 list and be eligible to play for Tuesday's rare 4 o'clock kickoff against the Seahawks. So Kyle, things are looking up for this Rams team in their biggest game of the season coming up on Tuesday.
Okay, Gerard Moncure live at SoFi Stadium. Gerard, thank you so very much. Here are the changes to the NFL protocols. Vaccinated players and staffers will only be tested now when they have symptoms. Symptom-free vaccinated players can be cleared to return from a positive test in as little as 1 day. Non-vaccinated players continue their daily testing. NFL Chief Medical Officer Alan Sills said earlier this week that many of the 100-plus who've tested positive this week would not have even sought a test based on no symptoms. Okay, so we have an awful lot to unpack here. And Ron, I want to start with you on this one. They say players only have to test if they're vaccinated. They only have to test if they're feeling symptoms. And I'm going to ask you this. As a player, would they even come forward with symptoms? You know the adage in the NFL, you play hurt, you play through injuries. So what does this say about the league, and do you really see players coming forward with symptoms if they're vaccinated?
A quick answer to your question, Kyle, no. It's just the culture of the league. It's you're talking about mid-20-year-old guys, and all their lives they've been taught, play in pain, play when you're hurt, suck it up, go get it done. So no, they're not going to do that, I don't think. The NFL has come out with new COVID testing protocols as a response to the Omicron variant, and I'm shocked because one of the biggest changes is vaccinated and asymptomatic players or staff members will no longer be tested weekly. The previous plan was to test, and they did test every single week at least. So now, if you're telling me the country is going through an increase and an upspurt here in pandemic numbers, then why are we testing less from an NFL standpoint? That's a little bit confusing to me. I think I know what the short answer is and the financial answer is. It's money. The NFL doesn't want to postpone, cancel games, and go through what they went through last year. At the end of the day, they ended up playing every single game, every single regular season game and playoff game and championship game and Super Bowl. So I think at the end of the day, it's about money.
All right, guys, and I want to ask you about this. An interesting response by the NFL. Obviously, a record number of cases in the past week, and they were on the precipice of games being potentially canceled, at least delayed. Their response to this is, we'll test less.
Yeah.
Are you concerned by this decision?
Well, I think you have to err on the side of caution, really, to tell you the truth, Kyle, because I think where it's coming, I think testing needs to be in place. But I think one of the reasons is that you're less likely to transmit the virus if you've been vaccinated and you're asymptomatic. And that's probably one of the reasons why they have less testing. But I think because of the spread, because of how many guys are affected, I think you have to continue to keep that in place as you move forward.
Yeah.
Jackie, let me ask you about this. You're going to basically have players who are vaccinated who may have COVID but are asymptomatic, and they're going to be playing in football games. As a player, would you be concerned about other players around you knowing that likely some of them have COVID?
Yes, I would. I most certainly would. And the reason why, and Ron just mentioned it, is because these guys, all of their lives, they have been conditioned to go and deal with pain and injury and to keep on going. Now, you are in a position now where you could be removed from the football team. If you got a scratchy throat or some symptom, you could be removed from the football team and isolated. And these guys, if they're vaccinated and they're being told we're not going to test you because you're vaccinated, they are not going to report the symptoms. This simply isn't going to happen. Yeah. And then, in my opinion, when you've got a bunch of guys walking around that's vaccinated that are asymptomatic, that means they could be breathing they could be breathing right on you and sharing what they've contracted with somebody else who may or may not be vaccinated. Whatever the situation is, if you have, my understanding is that if I have the coronavirus and I have been vaccinated, I am still capable of infecting other people with the breathing and touching and all that stuff. So it really concerns me. I really concern myself for my son. He plays with the Patriots. I hope that, he understands that he's looking at this and making sure he's being very careful and very cautious about the people he's around and where he's going, because this is no joke. And I mean, we haven't seen it yet, and hopefully we won't see it. But these young men are in the prime of life, at the zenith of their health, and no one expects anybody to die from this virus. But we have seen, I personally have seen, former players and teammates of mine succumb to this deadly disease over this last year or so. And I am not ruling out the possibility that some of these young guys could succumb to this deadly disease. We have a serious problem here. I'm concerned about it, not only for my boy, but for everybody. We want to get through the season as best we can, and I understand that. I really do understand it from a business perspective. But I'm wondering what's going to happen if one of these young guys get fatally ill and pass away.
Or a family member. Or
a family member. And we didn't even talk about that, because these guys are going home, going to the locker room, and they're leaving the locker room, and they're going home to the wives and kids, and they're vulnerable at home. Right. Some of them, parents live with them, or they're around their parents. So all of these issues need to be taken in consideration. And I don't know if maybe they should start testing the people at home a little bit more to make sure that they're safe.
Well, the virus is not going away, Kyle.
The NFL knows that a lot of vaccinated players are getting COVID, and they said that many of them are asymptomatic. So that by definition means that if you're not going to be testing them and they're asymptomatic, you are going to have players playing in football games that have COVID. And then you open up the door here for others to be infected. So, Ron, I ask you this: is the NFL being irresponsible by making this decision?
Boy, that's a tough word. Like I say, their motivation is about one thing, and that's money. Now, they can say it's this and that, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about the dollar sign, and I get that part of it. But what's interesting with this new COVID testing protocol, which is agreed upon coincidentally by the NFL and the NFL Players Association, the Players Union, they added another twist to this which says strategic target spot testing. So in other words, they will notify each NFL club when they want to, for whatever reason, to come in and say test the wide receiver room or test the defensive back room or the coaching staff. And no one will know why or for what reason until they get there to do it. It's weird. It's almost like, guys, back in the day when we played, is like random drug testing. In a sense.
You know, Ron, you said something. You said that it's all about money with the National Football League. And I think a lot of people would probably want to agree with you on that. But I'm not so sure. You know, if you think about what's been going on in our country over the last few years, I mean, there's a lot of disunity. There's a lot of distrust of one another here. And football, ever since I have known about this game professionally and been around it, has been one of the things that have drawn people together. And I'm not so sure. I'm not going to rule out the possibility that the commissioner of the National Football League doesn't see somehow that this whole thing of continuing the season is kind of helping our country to heal, helping our country to get back, going in the same direction. Because we've had a lot of issues, and football has a tendency to do that, as you know. So I don't want to just say it's all about the money. I do believe that has something to do with it, but, you know, there's a good possibility that the hearts of the men that are running this league right now, they're thinking about bigger issues, and football does a whole lot for our country. I really do believe that.
All right. I'm a little concerned that the message it sends to the public, those people that are watching the football games, what is it saying to them? If you're saying, well, we're getting a lot of positive tests, so let's test fewer people, and you wonder if it's not putting the importance on COVID and people being healthy as it should. But this is a discussion. We could talk about it all day and all night, but we've got a lot of other things to cover, so we'll take a break. But before we do, here is our BMW player